Hello and welcome to the Circuit Breakers interview series. I'm your host, Steve Semler at FocalPoint LearningSim. Today I'm joined by Justin Zenanko, who's a co-founder, president, and CEO of SynerFuse, an innovative medical device company combining two FDA-approved technologies to help patients manage lower back pain without narcotics. Justin, thanks for joining us. Would you like to kick us off with a brief bit of background as to who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my background is I grew up on a small hobby farm with two entrepreneurial parents in Minnetrista, Minnesota, and they still have the family farm today. So I learned a lot about work ethic and kind of what it takes to have responsibility from a young age, but also how your word's your bond. And in that farming community, it was all about how do you better the community. And it didn't matter about politics, it didn't matter about, the differences. If someone had a problem where a calf got out or there was a fire or there was something major, you dropped what you had to help the other person. And that really has given me the necessary values, if you will, to moving forward in business, which has served me very well. And so I ended up becoming a certified public accountant, and I learned the language of business, which is numbers. And then from that, I ended up getting a Master of Divinity, which is completely outside of the basis of anything else. But a lot of that interesting, perspective of God and man and how we all kind of interact together really has set the course of where I am today with SynerFuse.
Neat. Well, what sparked the idea to create SynerFuse? And I know this isn't your first business, your first go around.
So when I was working on a gene editing company called Recombinetics, where we raised $68 million through over a 10-year period, and was going after a big problem of kidney transplantation and gene editing of pigs into humans to solve that problem, that crisis. As the new health system came in and was a major investor, I ended up looking for my next role or next problem to solve. And I met, interestingly enough, a neuroscientist, a pain physician, and a neurosurgeon. And we were talking about the problem of back pain in fusion patients and how the physician was seeing all of these patients coming in that still had chronic back pain, but they had a successful fusion, meaning the rosin screws worked, the mechanical pieces worked, but they still had neuropathic pain. And it really dawned on me, like, why is this a problem that has not been solved yet? And back in that time, we were estimating that it was going to be about $1 million to just do the proof of concept study to prove out that if you combine two FDA technologies, NeuroStim plus Fusion together, and do off-the-shelf devices, that we could actually, prove or see that this was safe and get some early data. And it was just shocking to me that no one ever thought about doing it because there's no code for it. And what I found out is in today's medical device world, if you don't have a billing code for insurance, the therapy doesn't exist. It doesn't even get thought about, which to me was kind of appalling, because it's like, why are we not addressing these major medical issues?
Yeah, and it sounds like it's letting the payer situation address what therapies are available. Kind of got blinders on even.
Yes, and worse than that, if you can't get it paid for, therefore there is no innovation, there is no active approach to addressing pain, and you see that a lot more in medical device, less so in drug.
Mm.
where, you hear about drugs that cost over $1 million to implement for someone, but you don't see that stopping the drug company from looking to commercialize that aspect. But in med device, it's very different. It's if you can't get it paid for, and again, it's a lot of these 510Ks where they're trying to do iterations and predicate devices, and that's just something that is not. It's something that unfortunately is a barrier for medical device industry, and that to me is something that we should not let that get in the way of progress or innovation.
Sure. Yeah. What's been the approach? What are you trying to do to overcome that challenge?
Well, it's going back to the way medical devices kind of started with Earl Bakken, and us being in Minnesota, having that rich history of innovation. Earl Bakken didn't look at the world and say, well, can we get this paid for? He saw a problem and he addressed it. And they figured out how to pay for it. And the reality of it is, if we're really going to do innovation, you got to look at the end in sight, meaning if you're going to help people create value and help have less surgeries, less drugs, less pain, you have to really approach that from a standpoint of, even if there is no code, are we able to actually prove something and get something where it's going to provide such a tremendous value that you're going to be able to apply for a code? And again, you've seen this with, Inspire Medical. They go out and they produce something and they got a code and they went through that whole process, and now they're a tremendous success story. And that's another Minnesota-based company. That's where we have to get back to is, what is the problem? How big is the issue, and can we solve it? And if we can solve it, why are we not solving it?
Yeah. So what does it take from a business sense? You're got the CPA background. What does it take from a business sense to bring that team together to solve the problem and to do the innovation?
So you need to have your customer in mind. So in our case, that's neurosurgeons, spine surgeons, orthopedics, people that do spine surgery. So that customer in mind, and then you also need to have the IP, the intellectual property, then the medical device, technology, which is going to serve as your IP serves as the blocking tool and the ability to continue to actually get to revenue. Your device allows you to get to revenue because it allows you to implement your therapy. But then it's also just having those spine surgeons, your customers, endpoint of what problem are you solving for them and how do you make it better. And then you add in the people that you need to make it happen. And early on, we had, from the foundings, we had a neuroscientist, a pain physician, and it was more heavily focused in that area. But as we have continued to develop and grow from our proof of concept study, it's now heavily neurosurgeon, spine surgeon focused. And it has to be customer focused if you're going to actually change the standard of care, which is what our goal is. Less drug, less surgeries, better outcomes.
Yeah. Now, what's the balance of working with educating potentially, like future customers, and getting set up to produce on the logistics and supply chain side?
So the logistics and supply chain side is something that, so I'm focusing as an entrepreneur on what I can control today.
Okay.
So I will say this, I don't have any of the logistics figured out. I don't have any of the operating stuff figured out on the back end. But what I'm focused on is getting a trial completed, getting a device completed, getting all of those building blocks that gets to an FDA approval,
Yeah.
which, by the way, there's risk in all of that. raising the capital to get to that end goal. But I know this much, when we get to that point and we are able to have the approvals and all of the things and all the necessary building blocks, we're going to have a company that's going to allow us to attract the people that have the supply chain, the operational experience, because we have something that's so unique that nobody else has. And we know that because of our IP filings. We know that because of the uniqueness of our trial. When we look to other trials that are even close in the space, no one's going after this novel approach to chronic back pain, low back pain, and leg pain.
Yeah. Yeah, so this, I mean, it sounds like the strategy really is, we're going to do a really good job building it and getting it ready and proving it out. It's unique. It's got a market dominating position to get to start off with. And we know what we're going to need to do, further on, and keeping your focus on where it needs to be for now.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that I think entrepreneurs can struggle with is they think so far out that it becomes crippling, because if you're thinking about, well, how am I going to get the supply chain, or how am I going to get the operational people, how am I going to get the salespeople? Well, you have to first get a trial, then you have to see if it actually works, then you have to start building your constituents. But you got to think of it like a foundation. If you don't start with the first foundation, you can never build the base of your house. And if your foundation isn't right, it doesn't matter if you have the best salesperson in the world. If the foundation isn't right, the whole thing's going to crumble.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of around some of the things that you're working on. I've recently returned to my roots with simulations, with business simulations, and using them on the small business side. Where I had mentioned working with small business owners to dig into their financials and uncover some scenarios and play around with them and help them find profit opportunities and things that are kind of buried there. What are the sorts of things that from where you are in your role with SynerFuse that you're staying aware of as technology or trends that affect your business?
So I have done either a very good job or a very poor job, however someone wants to look at it, of keeping my blinders on to what our technology is. Today you hear about people using patches to get rid of pain, and you hear about all these different avenues that could potentially solve the same problem. I'm looking at the therapies of last resort of staying in that sector alone, which is spine fusion, meaning they tried everything else and they have a mechanical problem, but we got to address the neuropathic problem. But the other thing, the one trend that I will say, and everybody's, on the bandwagon of it, is AI. What does that actually mean? Well, in our broad sense of AI, I think AI could be used to better help the spine surgeons identify patients that are going to have these poor outcomes based upon the data, and going through all of the data of millions of patients. There's 50 million people in this country that suffer from low back pain. So of that, how do we identify those patients that are going to be suitable for these procedures and get to them sooner, earlier, and try to help them either avoid a spine fusion, or if they have to have a spine fusion because everything else has failed, well, then how do we make sure that we select the right patients faster so they get the right therapy that can actually help them get back to their lives? Because the one thing that unfortunately we do see is that when people have failed surgeries, that creates, they have chronic pain. And when they have chronic pain, they turn to opioids. And very hard to tell somebody who's suffering from pain not to take a drug to get any relief. And we've seen how dramatic and how big of a problem that is in this country I think I saw one estimate of $1.5 trillion a year is the impact of opioids in this country, and 100,000 people die per year from overdose. How much of those patients are from failed procedures?
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of data on that, but it begs the question, if failed procedures due to pain is one of the main arteries into that crisis, we should be looking as a country and as a society, how can we relieve that? And any relief is worthwhile for us to pursue.
Yeah. And that makes sense. That really ties, what you're doing to, at least two levels up of bigger purpose too. I mean, there's the individual pain side, but then there's a society problem with the opioids too.
And everybody can relate to someone who's in their family or friends who have suffered from addiction. And addiction is a terrible thing. And it's very hard to tell somebody not to do something when they are suffering. And, if you think about opioids were really developed for war,
Hmm.
to get somebody from a traumatic, experience of being shot to surviving long enough to get an operation done to save them so their body doesn't go into shock, to then later be used for cancer treatments for end of life. And now, unfortunately, you're using those same drugs to help people in their post-operative care to get through the pain of recovery. But then the problem is if it's chronic, opioids were never intended to treat chronic pain.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that we treat those patients correctly up front? And it doesn't just have to be what we're doing. I mean, this problem is so big that it's going to take everything that we can throw at it. And we got to look at it like a moonshot program. You throw everything at it, and not everything is going to work for everybody. But if we can make more things work, we're going to have a better society in the end, and that's what it's about.
Absolutely. Well, let me shift a little bit here, uh, and ask if you could wave a magic wand over your business and make one thing better in the business, kind of realistically, what would that be?
Well, as a business and a startup in medical device, you always need more money. No matter what the case is, you're always, whether your forecast, use of proceeds, there's always something that comes up. And it's kind of like I joke about this. Do you know when a budget is wrong?
How do you know when a budget's wrong?
The moment you make it, because you made it at the time, a point in time, and there's new data that just came out that would change your budget. So and that's, as an entrepreneur, it's okay that you're wrong. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you're continuing to move forward with the end goal. And you stop, you die. And in a lot of cases, it's, we were supposed to be able to get everything done for $1 million. And $20+ million later, we finally got to this first foundational of our proof of concept study with enrollment completed. And now going through the rest of it, we're on an endeavor that's probably going to be another 30 million to go through the next phases, and then for commercialization it's probably another 100 million. And looking at that, it sometimes can be very daunting and scary, but I know that the problem is so big and these issues are so tremendous that it propels you forward, because you don't really have a choice but to move forward.
Yeah. That sounds like it's kind of the starting of kind of my wrap-up question on the tips for entrepreneurs. So say more, if you would, about how do you overcome the challenges, stay focused, and keep going?
Well, you have to have that inner belief, and the proof is in what you're doing. In our case, we have early data, and that early data is very promising. and it's starting to get, published and spoke about in lectures and all this stuff. And when you see that and you see, the news clips of people who, were basically disabled and going back to riding a motorcycle, that type of stuff is so inspiring. It captures and motivates you. And at the end of the day, it's all about the patients first. And in the end, I'm proud to say that every time that it's gotten really, really dark and tough, it's always been the focus on the patients and are they getting better? Are the spine surgeons buying into what we're doing? And as you keep going and you keep getting this collaborative effort and you keep getting feedback, you keep getting to a better outcome than what you ever anticipated because you're learning and you're growing from that. If you're not growing, you're dying. There's no constant state. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. There's no in between. And as the CEO, I'm responsible for the vision of where we're taking the company and how do we allocate resources and how do we get those main constituents as part of the company. And we've been adding more spine doctors, medical doctors to our core competencies where we're identifying more applied outcomes that we can take this technology based upon our core patents. And, that's not to say, there's a stage and place for all sorts of people in the company, from the pain physician and the neuroscientist that started it with me to then moving to where we are now with the neurosurgeons. And, sometimes that process is hard. But again, if it's not hard, then you have to ask yourself, are you really endeavoring into something that's going to be worthwhile? And anything of value is always going to be hard. Like I'm newly married, and, there are times where, it is very, very hard, but there's value in that because it forces us to grow together and not apart. And like a team, you have to grow together and accomplish your goals. And, you're going to hear things that you don't want to hear all the time. We all want to feel that we're special and we're better than what we actually think we are. And it's always good to have that healthiness of the critiques to actually help us be better. And that comes from a diversified team, that comes from the collaboration and a place where, at the end of the day, if we're growing to make patients better, then it's okay to have hard conversations. And loyalty is a big component of that too, meaning you're loyal to the people who are loyal to you and you have their back.
Yeah. And that's mirroring the buy-in stages and the innovation enablers, like from the teams model, effective teams model. Exactly. It's not that we shouldn't have those conversations. We just have to be able to understand how to manage them so that we are innovative.
Well, and you also have to, the big underscore too that I'll tell for any entrepreneur is loyalty is a major component of moving innovation forward, because the problem is that if you don't have loyal people with you, then when you have vulnerabilities that are discussed, some people use those as an opportunity to exploit you or try to say, well, you're not doing a good job. And the reality of it is that it's about what is the effort that we're trying to accomplish? What is the mission? And loyalty is a big component of that, because if you don't have loyal people with you, I don't care what you are, you don't win a war by having disloyalty. You win by having loyal soldiers that go out, and if you're not going to, and this is the other piece too, a bit of advice for entrepreneurs, you got to be very careful of who you bring on your team, because if they're not bought into your vision, they will try to destroy you from within. And it's so hard, especially in medical device, to move anything forward. You have to have good, trusted, loyal people, people of integrity. And too often, I found in my own experiences, people say they're with you, but they're not really with you. And so you got to continue to move forward and to push forward. And again, you know, loyalty is a big factor of that, which and again, it allows people to express their ideas in a safe way, because they know that you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You're actually, like, what families do you know get rid of the child because the child made mistakes? They don't. You suffer through it and you try to not make less mistakes, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, being able to move forward is with the same vision, to be aligned, um,
Yeah, and
to
if they're
have.
not, and if you have people that are, if you have people that are not aligned with you, then the reality of it is if it's your idea and you are the founder and the CEO, they should not be in your company. Period. Go work for a well-established company where they tell you what to do with your life. You should
Yeah,
not be an entrepreneur.
yeah. This is what we're here to do. It's entrepreneurial. We're after this one thing. We're going to keep our eyes on it. Are you going in the same direction with me?
Absolutely. And you have to have that. And if you don't have that, then and by the way, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means that they're not suited for what you're doing.
Yeah,
And that's okay. There's a lot of people in the world that are not meant for entrepreneurship. There's a lot of people that are not meant for risk taking. There's a lot of people that should put their money into T-bills because they like a 5% return, and inflation's running, much higher than that.
yeah. Good words of wisdom, actually, when you think about it that way. Do it makes sense. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be, you're,
Hard.
you're going to right the people, and the hard things are worth doing. If it's worth doing and it's not hard, you might not be pushing yourself enough.
Correct. And if you're not making mistakes,
Hmm.
if you're not failing at something, then you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah,
And you have to be okay failing. Failure is not the end. Where the end is if you stop.
yeah. The end is where you stop. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today, Justin.
Oh,
Um,
thank you, Steve. I really appreciate spending time with me, and it was a pleasure to chat with you, and really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. And to those watching the podcast here, when you're faced with challenges in your business, consider these tips. Consider what Justin's been sharing with us here. And feel free to reach out to me for coaching and training support. As always, I'm Steve Semler, Focal Point Business Coaching and Learning Sim, helping techies be great leaders. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Cheers.